Okay, so let's start with your position, and just a little bit of background on sort of the scope of your position in relationship to our practice of psychology here in Ohio.
Okay. I'm Michael Ranney, Chief Executive Officer of the Ohio Psychological Association. Been in that position since June of 1996. My role includes responsibility for overseeing advocacy, continuing education, assisting psychologists with insurance issues, and overseeing a staff that provides support to our members. We have about 1,500 members out of roughly 3,000 licensed psychologists in Ohio, which is about typical for a state psychological association.
Thank you. And I'm Lynn Rappin. I'm a private practice psychologist and the chair of the personnel committee here in the Ohio Psychological Association. And I'm conducting the interview today about two subjects. And you may have other things that you can feel free to comment about too. But one of the main things that we're talking with people about is the effects of the pandemic on the practice of psychology, and in fact on the execution of your job as the executive director of OPA. And then the second subject we'll cover are the effects of social justice issues, Black Lives Matter, and other related subjects that may impinge upon the practice of psychology this year.
Okay. Well, back in March, I was at the Practice Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C., just as COVID was becoming a thing, and we were all concerned about it, concerned about being at a convention at the time that it was becoming apparent that it was an issue. Happy to get out of DC and happy to come home, only to find that it was a pretty big issue here too, and there were many things that we had to tackle right away. Not the least of which was the fact that within a matter of a month, we were scheduled to hold a convention, had everything all lined up, the venue and everything. We were even starting to get registrations, and we realized that we could not go forward with a face-to-face convention. We could see around the country and around Ohio that other conventions were being canceled, that people who worked for hospitals particularly were being told to cancel any travel plans. They didn't want them going to any large gatherings. And the state began to place limitations on gatherings and what people could do. So we had to cancel our convention, which was, I think, a real blow for our members who look forward to it, but it potentially was a financial blow for us because it's a major source of income. And our staff who had been working to plan the convention had to shift gears instantly to come up with another plan to help psychologists get the continuing education hours that they need. We were in the second year of our licensure biennium, and people had until the end of August at that point to get their CE hours complete for the 2-year cycle in order to renew their license. So they were depending upon us to give them hours, have hours available. At the same time, psychologists were all faced with having to shift how they operated and move quickly into telepsychology. And you know, we have some members who didn't even know how to turn on their computers, so they were looking to us for guidance on what platforms should they use, what could we help give them some training and consultation on how to conduct therapy using telepsychology, and people wanted information and resources. So we shifted our attention to building on our website a resource page that our members could turn to, and even non-members. We realized a responsibility to help all psychologists in the state at that point, whether they were members or not. So we started assembling various types of resources on our website, and we started doing town halls and self-care programs on Zoom to help people talk about what help they needed and what issues they were facing, and share information with each other, and address their concerns. And we did quite a series of those that were very well attended and very well received. And we heard from the people who participated that they were very helpful. Most of them were recorded, so they were also on our website for people who couldn't attend at the time we did them live. They could still look them up and get the benefit of the discussion and the information that was shared.
I know some were in so many people had interest. I know some of them exceeded the number you could accommodate through your Zoom portal. I think you had.
Yes, we had to expand our Zoom portal so that we could get more people involved and allow them to participate live. It was just a major shift in what we had been thinking we were going to do and what we had to do under the circumstances. I think, a lot of psychologists were kind of in a panic mode about how to provide service. People who had clients that had gone to other states but still wanted to get therapy through telepsychology, we had to help them wrestle with issues in terms of licensure requirements in the other state and whether they were waiving those requirements for temporary emergency support to clients that had traveled, like students whose schools had closed, had gone home, and yet they still wanted to maintain relationships with their therapists back here in Ohio. And so there was a lot of behind the scenes work to try to aid our members in being able to practice and giving them skills to be able to do telepsychology.
And what impacts were there on you and the other staff who were behind the scenes trying to make all these sudden changes?
Well, one of the most immediate impacts was that we pretty much decided that for the most part we would be working from home instead of at the office. That was a big shift, although we had, from time to time people had taken a day that they would work from home if they had something that they also needed to do at home. So we weren't unfamiliar with how to do that, but suddenly that became the main mode of providing administrative support to the association, and that was a pretty big shift. And we continue for the most part to be working from home even now and for months ahead, I'm sure. That was a big shift. And just the stress on the staff of having to change what we were doing so quickly, from getting excited and working on a convention that we had to cancel, and the uncertainty of what was going to lie ahead. We have one staff person who has kids in school, so that had an impact on her, that she was working from home with kids wandering around, and it was just a lot of extra stress that we all faced. And I particularly appreciated the self-care programs that we put together for our members. I think I went to all of them, which gave me a chance to get some self-care too. So.
Good. Yeah, good. And was there an economic hit from the contracts that you had for the convention?
There could have been, but there was not. Of course, the venue that we worked with, we've used many times, so we were, I think, a favorite client.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what other arrangements they may have made with other organizations that also had to cancel events, but they allowed us out of the contract without penalty.
That's wonderful.
At that point, the penalty would have been, I think, about $13,000, which would have been a big hit.
Yeah.
We did have to make a deposit for a future convention next April, and sign a contract for that, which now we're trying to get out of because we've decided we can't.
Right.
People won't be ready for a face-to-face event next April.
Right.
So there was that. We did shift most of the presentations to be recorded webinars that we could have on our website for members to access. And that worked out really well. We, in many ways, offset the loss of the convention by having those workshops online in a situation where there really was no overhead. We weren't paying for food and we weren't paying for audiovisual support and a venue. We did have to pay some for the process of recording the webinars, and some of the presenters still wanted their fee for doing the work, but that's only fair. But our overhead was really low for those, and people flocked to them. We sold more webinars than I think we ever have.
Yeah, and an unintended positive consequence from this disaster might be that people will look to OPA for more webinar CEU opportunities.
I think so. I think people who maybe hadn't even thought of using webinars or going to webinars much now appreciate the flexibility that's involved with a recorded webinar. They can pretty much do it at their leisure. They don't have to take time off of work, and they don't have to travel and pay for a hotel. They can do it from the comfort of their home, and it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, and I think one of the losses might be that in addition to the education opportunities that the live participation affords, is the opportunity to connect directly with colleagues, which I suspect not only for attendees, but for those of you who have relationships, broadly with psychologists all over the state who work for the organization, missed by having had to cancel.
I think that's true. I certainly have missed seeing people directly face to face and being able to talk with folks. To some extent, we've tried to make up for that with some of the programming we've had online in the town halls and so forth, where it can be a pretty lively exchange and interaction amongst people. And we've used on Zoom, there's a possibility to do breakout sessions. So we've used that in some cases for small group conversations that have been productive. It doesn't quite replace face-to-face interaction, but it's close to it. And there's
we're lucky to have that we're lucky to have that technology available.
Works pretty well. Yeah.
Right, and staff were already very skilled at that before the pandemic hit.
They were. Our staff were more used to doing it than I was, but now I think I've caught up. But we had Karen Harden particularly had done a lot of this, and I think taught us all how go forward with it.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I'm sure, I speak for myself, but I'm sure many other members would have the same feedback, that the services that OPA provided to us as psychologists in the state were fantastically helpful. Not only the individual support, that through the town hall meetings and the resource pages and the resource lists and so forth, but just to have the CEUs available for everybody who was closing out their 2-year, uh, 2-year CEU requirement. So forth. It's been a phenomenally supportive climate that the office has continued to provide. And I've had the opportunity, maybe more than some people, to see the staff at work firsthand, and I have been so impressed all along with what you and the staff do. But everybody stepped up to make it as seamless as possible for psychologists all around the state, and it's been extraordinarily impressive.
Well, we really felt that was important. We knew that people were having to deal with their own issues in terms of how to keep their practices going in a totally different way.
Yeah.
So we tried to make the rest of it as easy as we could for them.
Yeah.
And I think we did accomplish that for the most part. From what I hear from our members, they really do appreciate the resources we provided in the town halls, this continuing education opportunities. If we kind of had their backs, and we're helping them a lot with things as they tried to navigate through this pandemic situation.
Yeah. Yes.
And they're looking to us now for what's next. This is going to go on for a while, obviously. So we are trying to see what the course ahead might be, so that we can continue to be supportive.
Yes. Right, and already trying to figure out what to do instead of a live conference again in April. Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm thinking about the other part of the interview process that has to do with responses to issues of social justice and Black Lives Matter and so forth. And because you have been so intimately involved in the legislative side of psychology leadership in Ohio, you may have particularly relevant perceptions about the legislative pieces and social justice going on here in Ohio that might affect the practice of psychology and the reception of services that residents of Ohio deserve.
Yes, well, there have been, of course, the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others that have been just really a dreadful situation, and have led to demonstrations and riots. Real source of concern for us, and I think for a lot of our members. Perhaps not all of our members, but I think a lot of them are concerned and want some leadership from us. And through our Committee on Social Responsibility, we have issued some as the racism pandemic plays out, and we've kind of re-energized our diversity committee with some new leadership, and we're looking at actually doing a series of continuing education programs on racism from several different perspectives, and that's just being developed. We've established a collaborative relationship with the Association of Black Psychologists in Ohio, is primarily the Cleveland Association, but it connects with people in Cincinnati and Columbus as well, to participate in that. We're organizing a reception for the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus and our diversity committee members and OPA members who are interested the night before our multicultural conference. So on November 13th, the conference is on the 14th, and that's a virtual conference as well. And we're reaching out to, there are about 18 to 20 members of the Legislative Black Caucus to have them join us and just have a conversation about our goals and concerns and what we can do together to advance anti-racism activities and legislation.
Mhm.
Our board, I know we have a board meeting coming up in 2 weeks, and we're going to be spending a significant amount of time discussing racism and how we define it and what we as an association can do to impact it.
Mhm.
So we're trying to engage ourselves in anti-racism activities.
Yeah, that's huge. And do you see any impacts legislatively from events of this year, both in terms of on the healthcare side or on the social justice side coming through?
To some extent, that depends on the results of the election, which is coming up in 4 days.
Mhm.
But I know probably when we meet with the Black Caucus, we'll hear some of their initiatives that will be coming forward in terms of legislation that we can support.
Mhm. Yeah, reciprocity of care for mental health care has been such a benefit to the residents of Ohio. And I don't know if any of that will be threatened in upcoming years. It's hard to tell what will happen with all that.
We've been looking at the Trump administration's executive order on diversity training.
Mhm.
I know that's impacted a number of our members who work in large hospitals, some of whom had been scheduled to participate in diversity training, which has since been canceled because of that order.
Mhm.
Very short-sighted and inappropriate description of what those programs do. They've been very helpful, I think, and we certainly will support reinstating those when possible.
Mhm. Right. So this is sort of a little bit of a suspense period of time right now, right before people know what legislative options will be available or not.
For all of us, yes.
Yes, for everybody. Yes, for everybody. Right.
We wish that it would move faster.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the weekend when I want to really set my clock back.
Right. That's right.
Set it forward, make it go faster.
Yeah. Can you skip a few days? Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and yeah. So here are these these time event timely events that are occurring that have this tremendous impact. And
Mhm.
so when you think forward of the growth of OPA and opportunities for the future, can you still project out in a way that doesn't get impacted by either the pandemic or the the social justice crisis that we're experiencing?
Well, I mean, there's still kind of normal things that that we are doing and can do. the psychology board had its meeting just yesterday, and we were involved in that, and you know, appreciate the work of the board in trying to keep things going through this crisis, and support them. They've been supportive of some of our legislative efforts, the SIPAC legislation to get us into that interstate compact. They're very supportive of that, and hopefully that's going to happen.
No, that would be helpful.
Within a short time after the legislature comes back from break following the election. It passed in the Senate unanimously, so we're thinking it's going to do well in the House and fairly quickly. That's a key important piece of legislation, especially with telepsychology being now one of the main ways that people are managing their practices. So we're really interested in getting that passed this year. That would be a nice win. We'll see what other things are possible after the first of the year, and what we want to work on. We continue through Jim Broyles and our Director of Professional Affairs office to help psychologists with insurance issues, which continue regardless of anything else. So it's at a pretty normal pace right now that Jim is having people that he has to work with to help. We'll continue to gather resources and see that they're available for our members on whatever issues or topics come up and come out of this COVID crisis, and also with regard to the racism pandemic. We want to be able to provide some information on that so that people can be aware of what's involved in what we're doing.
Yeah, those are large scope kinds of projects. That have a lot of potential positive impact, both for psychologists who are practicing to be more sensitive and responsive to those issues with their clients, and also to serve our population more broadly. Yeah. Are there any other things? We're coming up to the end of our time that we've got budgeted for today. Are there any other things that you think would be helpful to comment about the state of psychology in Ohio right now?
Well, I think the state of psychology, despite all the problems, is pretty healthy. We see actually an uptick in our membership, I think, because we've been helpful to people, and they appreciate that. And people who haven't been members want to be sure that they continue to have access to resources and information that we've been providing. So we see continued interest in our webinars. We've gotten a large number of workshop proposals for our April convention, which we'll be reviewing in a week or so. And so we have plenty of CE things that we can offer people in the next year.
Yeah, you had a huge array of opportunities for people to complete their required CEUs.
Yeah, and that'll only grow with another 20 or 30 workshops.
Yeah.
And we'll just keep looking forward to the time when people can get back together a little bit face to face. I really think the main thing we hear from our members and the population in general is just the loneliness of this whole situation. So we wanted to try to help people deal with that.
Right. I would have seen you in person and I would have seen the staff in person by now
Yeah.
had this not been going on. Yeah. Mhm.
It's kind of crazy being in the office. And, you know, when I go in the mornings, David Sovia is there. He's our financial guy. But usually there's no one else there. And just sporadically, Beth will come in or Carolyn or Karen. But
Mhm.
mostly they're all working from home. And I work from home most afternoons. So that, you know, it's just a whole different way of functioning. But we, you know, we do our staff meetings by Zoom. So even as a staff, we don't have that face-to-face contact. You know, part of the routine has usually been that we all have lunch together and laugh and tell stories and look at stuff on Facebook that's funny and so forth. Well, we don't get to do that. So I really kind of miss that interaction and a little frivolity in the office. It's, you know, it's just
Lightens the load a little bit for everybody.
yeah, well, would have been helpful through some of the stuff that we've had to deal with, but
Yes.
make do and find other ways to get frivolity in your life. I've got a neighbor across the street who's decided that she was going to get people together every weeknight from 5:30 to 6:30 to stand on her corner and wave, put on costumes and wave at
Oh,
cars as they go by. So, you know, she's had like a dozen people out there in different costumes every weeknight. And it's, you know,
wow.
that's, you know, what a great thing to do to make people smile. One lady said, I drove around the block 5 times because it was so good to see. So we all have to find ways to
Yes.
lighten the load.
Dig deep.
Right.
Dig deep. Well, I appreciate your leadership in OPA so much.
Thank you.
feel blessed to be a member under your care and your staff's care. You have
Thank
taken
you.
such good care of us as practicing psychologists, and I appreciate it so much. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to contribute both to the Cummings Project and to the OPA Oral History Project, because this interview will serve as a source of information for both of those.
Great. Thank you very much.
Both
And
of
we,
those
you know,
purposes.
staff, speaking for staff, we appreciate all you do for us as kind of our advocate with the board. So I'm glad you're still engaged and involved with that.
Yeah, I tell you what, it has a lot of meaning for me. You know, I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.